quick as a disclaimer, you wouldn't recommend kids throwing a slider?
Never, ever. I never threw a slider until I got to the big leagues. I didn't even know how to throw a slider from the standpoint of there was no emphasis of it back then. Parents are so consumed with their kids dominating so early, you cannot teach 95, 96 miles an hour. You can't.
Nope.
Nobody's ever been able to do it. So if you've got the velocity, protect that arm and keep them away from throwing the slider, which no young kid's going to hit,
Fastball,
and no big leaguer's going to hit.
Change up, curveball,
Correct.
you can get by.
So that's why when the curveball's a lost art. The curveball is not thrown as hard. It spins just as much, but the velocity at which you throw a curveball is more of a change of speed.
So what's better on your arm?
Curveball's better on your arm.
Really?
Yeah, because the curveball, you can't throw a curveball like this, right? You have to throw a curveball, and it has an easier motion, and it creates spin.
Yeah, I started out my career throwing a four-seam slider, and it was really tight, and late breaking is what really gave me the ability to not only get some strikeouts, but get them off my fastball. And I threw it in a way where the fastball would be like this, my slider would be like this, but the difference is at release, we had the throw, turn, and pull in. So it created a lot of torque, and my fingers were behind the ball and could really get the ball to break late. And then after Tommy John, the one thing that I learned to do is I couldn't duplicate that kind of slider. So I went to an off-center slider, more traditional slider, and that really allowed me not to miss a beat. And I would change the break based on how I would turn more or less the ball in my hand. So everything for me was a feel pitch. And I could change the break in the strike zone based on the way that I would manipulate the baseball right at the end. And if I wanted a tighter slider, it was more of a tighter, short break out in front. If I wanted to sweep the slider / slurve, I would take and really have more of a loose hand and loose fingers breaking through. So this really got me right back to where I needed to be after Tommy John, but the pitch that made me was the four-seam slider, because that red dot that would be very small is the one thing hitters didn't like to see.
It down so it had more of like a bullet spin axis to it, so it wasn't getting the movement that I wanted.
How did you find that? On video?
Video, yeah,
Okay.
high-speed camera, the Edgertronic camera. So I changed my grip a little bit, and this is the grip that felt most comfortable with having my thumb under the ball. Which coincidentally is actually exactly how Kluber and Clevenger throw their lateral breaking pitch.
Waved at that pitch. Swing and a miss. Swing and a miss. Swing and a miss. Swing and a miss. As Machado, the swing and a miss. Swing and a miss.
Ooh, that slider is looking awfully nice indeed. And luckily for you, I'm about to teach you how to throw that slider so you too can strike out every single hitter you face. Okay, so let's talk about the slider. First off, the grip. How do I hold it? Well, it's basically a two-seam grip. All right, I'm holding the ball directly on these two seams, pointer and middle finger, and then I'm tucking this thumb underneath, right on the horseshoe, right like that, okay? So the way I go about getting this in my glove in the first place is I find this seam right there with my thumb, I grab that seam with the thumb, get the thumb comfortable, and then I just lay these fingers on the ball like that, and it just fits nicely in my hand. Now you can see these fingers here are not tensioned down like they were on the curveball, okay? They're not all the way up, of course, but I find the seam with that, thumb right there, put these two fingers on the ball like this, and then these just kind of hang out in a comfortable position. Now, you can just take this ball right out of my hand, all right? And that's on purpose. I like to hold the ball loose for a couple different reasons, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But let's talk about the keys. Shut up, phone. Let's talk about the keys to throwing this pitch. Keys to throwing this pitch. So we're gonna have a loose grip. Like I said, that's the first thing. Now you wanna have a karate chopping motion with your hand. Now same thing, anytime you're throwing a breaking pitch, you wanna have this wrist locked. You don't want it to bend this way, and you don't want it to bend that way at all. You want it to be locked in right there in a neutral position, locked in right there in a neutral position. So I have loose grip, and I have this karate chopping position with my wrist. Now the next key that I want to do is I want to push the side of the ball forward, okay? And that's gonna get the ball to spin to the side like this. So I want to basically push this part of the ball forward. On the curveball, I was trying to pull the front of the ball down like this. On the slider, I want to push, my hand's kind of like this when I throw it, it's kind of out to the side. So I want to push the side of the ball right here forward like this. I'm not trying to pull it straight down like this. I'm not trying to snap my wrist. I'm not trying to get underneath the ball or supinate it or anything like that. I'm trying to push the side of the ball forward, and you can see how that puts kind of side spin. Now it would be in this position here, so you can see how it puts kind of side spin on the ball when I push the side of the ball forward, okay? And the last thing that I'm thinking about is I'm trying to drive my pointer finger directly to the plate. I'm almost thinking like I'm going to point this thing to the plate. You're going to take the pointer finger and you're going to point it like this, okay? Now you can see you're still pronating the forearm, but you're gonna take that pointer finger and you're gonna point it straight to your target. And what that's gonna ensure that happens is that that pointer finger is going to be the last one to leave the ball. The thumb is gonna slip, the ball rolls into the fingertips. The fingertips go forward, the middle finger comes off the ball, and that pointer finger is going to press the side of the ball forward as it's turning over, okay? Just like that. So those are the 4 keys to actually throwing this pitch. It's loose grip, stiff wrist, get on the side of the ball, you're going to press the side of the ball forward, and the pointer finger is going to be the last thing that touches the ball, okay? Why do we have a loose grip? Well, if you have tension on the ball, the more tension that's on the ball, the longer it's going to stay in your hand. That makes sense, right? If you have too much tension on the ball's just never gonna come out of your hand. We gotta get the ball to come out of our hand, so we need the right amount of tension. On the curved ball, it has to stay in my hand long enough, while my hand's coming like this, it has to stay in my hand long enough that my middle finger can get to the front of the ball to impart the spin. So there needs to be a good amount of tension. If that curved ball comes out of my hand back here, it's just gonna pop up and it's gonna be a very bad pitch. But on the slider, I'm not trying to get to the front of the ball. If I get to the front of the ball, that's gonna pull the axis down and it's gonna make it more of a gyroscopic axis. So I'm trying to get on the side of the ball, which means the ball has to slip out of my hand earlier, because as my hand's coming through, it needs to be in this position, not that position when I release it. So if I hold on to the ball and my hand gets to this position, it makes the movement of the pitch worse. So I need the ball to come out of my hand a little bit earlier. So looking at it from the side, if I'm in this position, I can press the side of the ball forward because my hand's moving in that plane. But if the ball comes out of my hand here, I'm no longer pressing the side of the ball forward, I'm pulling the side of the ball down, okay? So I gotta get the ball to come out of my hand when my hand is in a vertical position so that I can then press the side of the ball forward with the pointer finger, like that, all right? And that's why I have a loose grip. When I was originally developing this pitch, I had a lot of tension on the ball because I wanted to spin it very fast, and that's a misconception. With pitches that you're not getting completely on the side of the ball, such as the curveball and the slider, more tension usually increases the spin rate. But on pitches like the curveball and the slider, where you're right on the side of the ball, any force is going to produce a lot of spin because it's all going to spinning the ball and not as much to pressing straight through the ball and creating linear force. I keep wanting to say momentum, but that's the wrong term. If you press through the center of the ball, you get linear force. If you press through the side of the ball, you get rotational force. So any little bit of force on the side of the ball is going to spin the ball, so I don't worry about getting tension on it because I need it to come out of my hand at the right time. So for me, loose grip is important, and that is why I tuck my thumb underneath here. If I hold onto the ball like this, where my thumb kind of like grabs the ball here, then I have too much tension on the ball and it won't come out of my hand in time. But if I tuck my thumb all the way underneath, the ball comes out way too early. So I needed something that I could keep the ball in my hand with just the right amount, and I found that if I hook that seam with my thumb, just like this, not like this, but like this, it'll stay in my hand long enough, and then the seam will just slip right up there. It's pretty easy that it slips right there. And then the ball is out of my hand and my fingers can press it forward. And you can actually see that if you look at the screen here. When the thumb slips off of the ball, then it's in my fingertips. You can see that my fingertips are pressing straight forward towards the target, and that my pointer finger is the last thing to leave the ball. Okay, so now you know why it spins the way it spins because of how I grip it and how I throw it. You know why the spin creates the movement that it creates and how the spin creates the movement that it creates. So how do you actually go about using this pitch? Well, let's check that out. So here's the pitch, the slider that ends up down and away to a righty, and it's followed up by a fastball that ends up perfectly up and in to a righty. Now, if you overlay these, you can see coming out of the hand, they look almost identical. All right, now the slider actually starts off a little bit to the right and a little bit higher than the fastball. So to the hitter's eye, he's gonna see a fastball that is up and in. That's the trajectory he's gonna see. Now the fastball ends up perfectly up and in. It actually hits the red dot of the target, and the slider almost hits the red dot of the target down and away. It ends up slightly above the red dot. So this is a strike on the black away with a slider and a fastball up at the top of the zone on the black for a strike. Now this can be used as a tunnel pitch for strikes. The other way that you can use this is as a freeze pitch. right? And those are really the two main ways you use it. You can throw the slider for a strike and tunnel it off that high fastball. You can move the fastball down in the zone a little bit and throw the slider as a tunnel pitch out of the zone to get chase, but you're still using the same concept of tunneling. You can also use it as a freeze. So let's check out what it looks like as a freeze pitch. Here's the same fastball overlaid with a slider that ends up down and basically middle of the zone, but it could also, the effect would be more pronounced if it ended up a little bit more to the right, thinking a backdoor slider to a lefty, down and away to a lefty, or down and in to a righty. So let's look at what that looks like coming out of the hand. And you can see the slider immediately starts off more to the right than the fastball. Now, if you track the fastball all the way to the plate, this is going to hit the red dot, and it starts off about the middle of the zone. So when a hitter sees that pitch, if he sees something start middle, he thinks it's a fastball that's going to run in so he can open up to hit it. But this fastball hits the inner black. So anything that starts closer to the hitter than that might run in and hit him. So if he reads this as a fastball, he's going to read that I need to get out of the way of that pitch, it's going to hit me, or don't swing. Similarly for a lefty, he might read this as a fastball that's going to run off the plate away from him and shut down his swing, and then this slider that starts more to the right of the fastball will actually come back and land in the strike zone. So you can use this as a front hip freeze to a righty. You can also use this as a backdoor freeze to a lefty. And those are the two primary ways that you can actually go about using this pitch, as a tunnel pitch with the fastball or a freeze pitch off of the fastball. Something that looks like a strike and ends up as a ball for chase, something that looks like a ball and ends up as a strike for take. Okay, now the last note that I want to make on this pitch is, if you get it right, it's an outlier pitch. All right, it means it moves more, it moves differently than the vast majority of other pitches out there. The vast majority of sliders don't have this much sweep to them. So you can actually get away with throwing this in the zone. You don't have to be perfect with it. You don't have to throw it on the black or just off the black. Or just try to center it up in the middle of the zone. You're gonna miss a little bit because it moves so much, but it's going to be really hard to hit regardless. So you want to get this as close to the zone as often as possible because you want to generate a swing. The last thing you want the hitters to do is sit there and say, I'm just not going to swing at that pitch at all because I can't hit it, and then you have to throw it for a strike. You want to throw it for a strike often enough that they have to swing at it because they know you'll throw it for a strike, and then you can get them to chase outside of the zone, or you get really bad contact because they just can't hit the pitch. That's how I use it, and I imagine if you're throwing it, that's probably how you should use it if you nail the spin axis correctly. So that is the slider. Hopefully you learned something in watching that. It's one of the best pitches in my arsenal. It's one of my favorite ones to throw, specifically to righties, and I hope that it becomes one of your favorite ones to throw. I taught you how to throw it in a safe manner, the safest manner possible, so that you're not gonna put yourself at injury risk. Remember, stiff wrist, don't deviate this way and don't deviate like this. Lock that thing in, press the side of the ball forward as you're pronating, turn that pointer finger over. You're gonna protect your elbow, you're gonna throw a nasty pitch.
Don't let anyone say that it's just a game, for I've seen other teams and it's never the same.